There was once a prince who lived with his father and mother, the king and queen, in a splendid palace. He was blessed with the finest upbringing, the best education that money could buy, a life of luxury where every desire he had was met. And yet one day, the prince startled his parents with a peculiar conclusion about himself. He declared that he wasn't a human at all. No, he wasn't a prince. He was a turkey. A turkey, yes. At first, the king and queen laughed. They thought it was a giant joke. But soon, the laughter died away. The prince refused to sit at the royal table. He cast off his clothing, he hid beneath the table, and he began pecking at crumbs on the floor like a bird. Imagine the despair of the king and queen watching their beloved son, once the joy of their lives, crawl away from the light of the royal table and into the darkness beneath it. Imagine the shame, the helplessness, the ache of not knowing how to reach him. They summoned all of the most educated doctors in the land and the finest teachers, but nobody seemed to be able to help. At last, when all seemed lost, a gentle, humble, wise sage came to the steps of the palace, and he said, "I will cure your prince, and I will do so free of charge. My only condition is this: no one shall interfere with anything I'm about to do." It seemed a little strange, but the king and queen were desperate. They didn't know what else to do, so they agreed. The very next morning, the prince found that he was no longer alone under the table. The wise sage was sitting there beside him. "What are you doing here? Gobble, gobble, gobble." "Well, what are you doing here? Gobble, gobble." "Well, I'm here under this table because I'm a turkey." "Gobble, gobble, gobble." "Well, I'm a turkey too." "Gobble, gobble." And so that's how it went. They were both there together under that table, gobble, gobble, gobbling, and pecking at crumbs from the floor. The prince was astonished. At last, he had a companion. And so the days passed like this. Then one morning, the wise sage found the king and asked the king to fetch him a shirt. "What are you doing? Turkeys do not wear shirts." "Gobble, gobble, gobble." "Well, you can still be a turkey and wear a shirt." Okay. And soon, both the turkeys were clothed. The next day was trousers. You can still be a turkey and wear pants. I guess so. Step by step, the sage continued. Before long, he had persuaded the prince that turkeys too could enjoy the delicacies of the royal kitchen, and that turkeys actually could sit at the table and hold a conversation. And though the prince still felt like a turkey on the inside, his life was transformed. He carried himself with dignity, and he returned to the table as if he had never left. Fortunately for us, most of us don't suffer from turkey complexes. But I think a lot of us struggle with the essential question that the turkey prince asked in this story. Who am I? And how do I want to live? We exist with relentless pressure to feel certain ways about our lives and ourselves, yet defining our lives and ourselves on our own terms is more important now than ever. The world needs people of conviction. The world needs people who are not afraid to use their voice. The world needs people who dare to illuminate the good. This Rosh Hashanah, the call is clear. Choosing life means choosing who we want to be, even if we sometimes feel like turkeys, lost and afraid. If the world needs us so desperately, why do so many of us feel powerless to step up? Well, there's a lot to feel anxious about. There is the nightmare that is the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza, the rise of fascism and the silencing of free speech, fear of gun violence, attacks on science-backed medicine, the depression of climate change, exhaustion from socioeconomic inequality, political polarization. Did I miss anything? These worries are real. Statistics show that they consume us. Anxiety is now the most common mental disorder in the United States, impacting 40 million American adults, or 1 in 6. Maybe for you, anxiety feels like your chest tightening up each night as you're trying to fall asleep. Or maybe it's the endless scrolling, your thumb moving across your phone, almost as if it's a phantom, searching for that next headline, that next disaster. Maybe it's the knot in your stomach that wells up before you're about to make an important point in a heated conversation, but you fear that whatever you're about to say will offend someone. I tell myself that anxiety is nothing new. As Jews, we know this better than most. We have endured millennia of persecutions, pogroms, and power struggles. Our greatest heroes were often riddled with self-doubt, and they felt defeated by the world too. Take Moses at the burning bush, for example. When God calls on him to free the Israelites, his first words are, "Who? Me? Who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites?" Who among us hasn't felt like Moses? I know I have. I stand before you tonight as a rabbi called to lead, to guide, to speak, and still, like Moshe Rabbeinu, my heart often whispers, "Who, me? Who am I to know what's best for Israel, for the United States, or even for this very community?" Like Moses, I quake with uncertainty. This is why we opened our prayer service tonight with Hineni. Each high holiday season, the clergy recite, in this case, Cantor Weiss, saying these words, "Here I am, so poor in deeds, I tremble in fear, overwhelmed and apprehensive. Although unworthy, I rise to pray and seek favor for your people, Israel." Moses trembled, and so do we. Yet his trembling did not excuse him from his call, and neither could he just ignore it and run away. In fact, it became the very foundation of his response. After a lifetime marked by stuttering, anger, and overwhelm, we read at the end of Torah, "Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom God singled out face to face." Moses models for us what it means to be a Jew, the ultimate Jew, in fact, when everything feels like it's falling apart. The 20th century Jewish philosopher Emanuel Levinas once wrote that to be Jewish is not only to seek a refuge in the world, but to feel for oneself a place in the economy of being. To be Jewish is not only to seek a refuge in the world, but to feel for oneself a place in the economy of being. In other words, Jewish life is not only about finding comfort in our faith or rituals or our community. It's not hiding under the table because it's easier just to ignore all that's wrong. It is about inhabiting all of it and still deciding how, not if, but how we will show up, to be anxious, to feel unworthy, even to tremble and nevertheless to rise. That is what it means to choose life. For me, this struggle has adopted a newly personal dimension in the last year. You see, I am 6 months pregnant with my first child. My husband and I waited a long time before we decided we were ready for this. Honestly, we debated whether to bring new life into such a broken world. But the worse things grew, the clearer it became. Last November, following the presidential election and accepting that there was no end in sight in the fighting between Israel and Gaza, we decided that the world needs people of conviction. The world needs people who aren't afraid to use their voices. And the world needs people who dare to illuminate the good. So here we are. And that's who we'll raise our child to be. For me, bringing life into this fractured world is an act of choosing life, even when fear whispers, it's not the right time. Jewish anxiety appears everywhere, but I've learned that it is especially prevalent around pregnancy. The Jewish response to hearing that someone is pregnant is not mazel tov, but rather besha'a tova, which means in a good hour. To congratulate is too far for Jews. What if something goes wrong and we've congratulated too soon? Or what if, and this is where Jewish worry is in a league all its own, what if our premature mazel tov somehow induces a problem? Instead, we pray that no matter what happens, we will hold on to the notion that it's all in a good hour, meaning it's all in God's hands and whatever is meant to be will be. As soon as I started telling people that I am pregnant, they asked me if I plan on having a baby shower. My gut instinct was, no way, oh my gosh. That Jewish voice inside me muttered, don't celebrate yet. Don't relax, you can't. Don't invite joy when the world cries out in pain. But then I realized that's exactly why I need to celebrate. If we wait for the world to be perfect before we rejoice, we will never rejoice at all. It may not be a good hour for everyone. In fact, I know it is not a good hour for everyone. For those suffering in war, for those battling illness, for those struggling to pay rent, and yet, right now, this very moment, is a good hour for me. And that's how I want to, actually that's how I need to define this moment. This, my friends, is the message of Rosh Hashanah. Tonight begins a season when we are commanded to step back, to take stock, and ask, who am I? And how do I want to live? The shofar doesn't just wake us up. It asks, will I stay under the table eating crumbs like a bird? In her new book, Unfolding, Rabbi Karen Kadar imagines the internal monologue of our turkey prince. He says, I've lost my words with all the noise and the rambling that abounds. So many opinions of who I should be that nobody even noticed I crawled under the table. I pretend to be satisfied, but I eat only crumbs. Somewhere on the way to responsibility, I lost myself. My youthful exuberance diminished somehow. Once, I romped among the fields of possibility, dreaming, playing roles to see what shall become of me. Shall I be a firefighter, a ballerina, a general, a superhero, a painter? Shall I save the world, invent the world, rule the world, beautify the world, color outside the lines? I knew I could be anything. And then somewhere in the rubble of could've, should've, would've, I lost my words. I walked away from the dreams, left the table that was set for me before my birth, abundant, nourishing, a grandly set table. Friends, the Torah tells us, I set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. Rosh Hashanah is that moment of choice. What would it look like for each of us to follow in the footsteps of the turkey prince, put on a shirt, put on some pants, reclaim our dignity, and step back into life? Rabbi Kadar continues, bring me a sweater, wise sage, and jeans for when I get cold. I am vulnerable to the bare inquiry of who I am and what shall become of me. Bring me socks and shoes so that when I am ready, I can rise and stand firm. Set the table banquet style, for I am regally awaiting to regain my place at the table. Choosing life does not mean ignoring brokenness. Let me be clear. It means refusing to let brokenness have the last word. It means saying that even in a world that trembles, we will bring new life. Even in a year filled with bitterness, we will taste that sweetness of the apples and honey. Even amidst uncertainty, we will find our way. When my child asks me about this time, I'll tell him, in 2025, the world felt like it was falling apart. But your Father and I chose you anyway. In a world that tries to define us and what's possible, you, my child, prove that anything is possible. Judaism teaches that even when we feel like turkeys under the table, even when we quake like Moses and feel like saying, who, me? We can still choose life. This year, may we all be brave enough to climb out from under that table. May we taste the apples and honey not only as symbol, but as promise, that this will be a year when we rise with trembling hearts but steady courage for ourselves, for our people, and for the world. Shana Tova.